Hello again. This week we're continuing our erstwhile focus on British autos of the last century and taking a look at the first mass-produced vehicle, the G4, to emerge from Ginetta, one of only a small handful of extant UK-based auto manufacturers to have survived as an independent from the industry's heyday in the 1950s until today. Unless, of course, they've gone bust in the last 48 hours. Hopefully they haven't. And technically, they're no longer fully independent, but they're owned by a small business consortium that's not otherwise associated with one of the large auto manufacturers, so we're counting them as an independent. Founded as a joint venture between the four Walklett brothers, Bob, Ivor, Trevors, and Douglas, which to me seems a bit of an odd assortment of names, largely Ivor. Seems to be a bit out of left field, but the first few vehicles that Ginetta produced were what one might call prototypes in a more engineering sense of the word. The G1 was a hodgepodge assemblage of parts that came to a sudden arboreal end after losing a fight with a tree stump. The G2 was a small production kit car designed in a similar vein to the Lotus and later Caterham 7s. Production of about 100 units using Ford drivetrain components, and the G3 was designed as a lightweight racer and served as a learning experience and design study for their first big success, the G4. Produced from 1961 to 68, the G4 was intended primarily as a road vehicle, but nevertheless proved popular and successful on track as well. Like its predecessor, it sported curvaceous fiberglass body panels draped over a steel tube frame chassis, with the central passenger compartment bonded to the chassis as a separate component. The engine was in the front, although which engine actually lived under the bonnet was a matter of choice. Most were delivered with a 1-liter Ford engine good for about 40 horsepower, but a variety of other power plants were available. Later cars more frequently came with a larger 1.3-liter engine that provided about 91 horsepower, and a Lotus twin-cam option is one of the rarer and thus more desirable specifications originally offered from the factory. Front suspension was wishbones with coil springs, while the rear used a live axle sourced from the Ford parts bin. The use of a large OEM's mechanical bits was, of course, rather common at the time, not just at Ginetta, to save on development costs and reliability, and indeed virtually all of the unaffiliated British manufacturers were sourcing certain mechanical components from BMC, Ford, or others. By 1963, a coupe had been added to the lineup alongside the Roadster, and an entire roofless Barchetta would be offered as well, although without immense popularity. The offering of a 1.5-liter engine lifted from a Ford Cortina GT reportedly offered speeds up to 120 miles an hour, which, despite only producing somewhere in the neighborhood of 70 or 80 horsepower, is not terribly surprising given the car weighed only around 450 kilos or 990-ish pounds. While initially fitted with drum brakes on all four wheels, that may actually have been the G3, the fronts were switched fairly quickly to discs, and I believe the rears eventually followed suit at the end of its design life, although this may have been an aftermarket or later upgrade rather than a development from the factory boffins. In fact, the G4 was in a state of near-continuous improvement across the vehicle's production run, including the provision of an independent rear axle to improve handling, and a comprehensive chassis redesign from circular to square tubes, and stressing the transmission tunnel, which both added weight but improved stiffness and ease of manufacture. Pop-up headlamps to meet regulation changes in 1966 harmed the vehicle's looks and consequently its popularity before it was finally taken out of production in late 1968 or early 1969. Though a G4 was never raced at Le Mans during its production, it was nevertheless a popular club and national-level racer and proved a stepping stone into the more expensive echelons of the sport, particularly in the UK and Europe, where it saw success in class on virtually every permanent track open to it at the time. Factory driver Chris Meek, in particular, brought the car good press and further sales, and the twin-cam-powered factory car brought home 8 class victories and 6 additional second-place finishes in the 1964 British national season. It has enjoyed enduring popularity as well, with consistently improving resale values and regular entries at historic races, including the 2 lovely examples that have provided the lion's share of photos for this video, which are both run by Michael's Vintage Racing in the US, who rather specializes in old British cars of the era, especially Ginettas and Elvas. With that, we come to the end of another short video, and for this week's call to action not featuring the 3 sacred words of YouTube,
like, comment, subscribe.
Heck, I don't know. Keep your stick on the ice. Also, I am targeting a completion and release of the 2023 World Endurance Championship Year in Review video on March 1st instead of a 5-minute guide, just barely squeezing it in before the first race of this year's WEC season. And to any of you listening, would be delighted to have you watch along for the premiere. As with the IMSA video, I'll probably be starting it at 5 o'clock Eastern time, so that'll be 10 o'clock UK and 11 o'clock European Central Time, but it will be in one part this time and probably of similar length. That just leaves it for me to say thank you for your time this evening, or whenever and wherever you are watching, and I wish you all a good night and a good tomorrow.